When we think of World War II spies, we usually picture men in trench coats and fedoras. But thousands of women were working behind the scenes of military intelligence. They cracked codes, infiltrated enemy territory, and put their lives on the line for victory. The Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, was America's first intelligence organization to actively deploy women in dangerous operations. For decades, their stories remained classified. This is the story of those who fought in the shadows. Before World War II, the United States had no centralized intelligence service. The Army and Navy ran their own intelligence units, but they barely coordinated with each other. When war erupted in Europe, it became clear that America needed a modern spy agency. In the summer of 1941, President Roosevelt created the Office of the Coordinator of Information. He put William Donovan in charge, a World War I veteran and successful lawyer. Donovan believed intelligence should be more than just an information source. It should be a tool for active operations. After Pearl Harbor, the organization was restructured. In June 1942, the Office of Strategic Services was born. The OSS was given sweeping authority to conduct intelligence and sabotage operations around the world. Donovan was ahead of his time. He understood that total war meant using every resource the nation had, including women. At a time when most military organizations saw women only as secretaries and nurses, Donovan saw potential agents. The OSS launched an aggressive recruitment campaign. They looked for people with language skills, technical backgrounds, and the ability to think on their feet. A degree from a prestigious university didn't hurt. Many early hires came from East Coast elite families. Women answered the call in droves. They wanted to serve their country beyond factory floors and hospital wards. Many had excellent educations and spoke multiple languages. They were ready for risk and adventure. At first, women were hired for administrative work. They served as secretaries, file clerks, and cipher operators. But Donovan quickly saw their potential. Women could go places men couldn't. They attracted less suspicion. Gradually, the OSS began training women for field operations. They learned espionage, sabotage, and covert tradecraft. Training camps were set up in remote locations: the Virginia mountains, Maryland forests, the Canadian wilderness. The training program was brutal. Women learned firearms, hand-to-hand combat, and radio operations. They mastered surveillance and counter-surveillance. They practiced lock-picking, document forgery, and working undercover. Many male instructors were surprised by what their students could do. By war's end, about 4,500 women worked for the OSS. That was nearly 40% of the organization's total staff. They served on every continent: Europe, Asia, Africa. Their roles ranged from analysts to field agents. Among all the women of the OSS, one stands out. Virginia Hall became a legend in her own time. The Gestapo called her the most dangerous of all Allied spies. Her story proves that physical limitations can't stop a determined spirit. Virginia was born in Baltimore in 1906 to a wealthy family. She got a first-rate education, studying at several European universities. She spoke fluent French, German, and Italian. She dreamed of becoming a diplomat. In 1933, while working at the embassy in Turkey, tragedy struck. During a hunting trip, she accidentally shot herself in the leg. Gangrene set in. Doctors had to amputate below the knee. Virginia was just 27. The prosthetic leg she wore was a constant source of pain. Virginia nicknamed it Cuthbert, but she refused to let disability define her. She kept studying, kept traveling, kept building her career. The State Department, however, dismissed her. They didn't employ people with disabilities. When war broke out, Virginia was in Paris. She joined the French Army's ambulance service. After France fell, she made her way to London. There, British intelligence, the Special Operations Executive, recruited her. Virginia was sent into France as an agent. Her cover was an American newspaper reporter. She set up shop in Vichy, capital of the collaborationist government. From there, she ran resistance networks. Virginia organized weapons drops and agent insertions. She built networks of safe houses. She helped downed Allied pilots escape to Spain. She fed intelligence about German forces back to London. Her operations were remarkably successful. But the Gestapo picked up her trail. Members of her network started getting arrested. Virginia had to get out fast. In the winter of 1942, she crossed the Pyrenees on foot. Hiking through snow-covered mountains on a prosthetic leg was excruciating. But she made it to Spain. Back in London, Virginia joined the OSS. American intelligence jumped at the chance to recruit such an experienced operative. In March 1944, she was inserted back into France, this time as an OSS agent. Virginia operated in central France this time around. She coordinated partisan units, preparing them to support the Allied invasion. She radioed intelligence about German positions. She organized sabotage against railways and communication lines. Her disguise was brilliant, an elderly peasant woman. She dyed her hair gray, hunched her shoulders, and changed her walk to hide her limp. The Gestapo was looking for an elegant American woman with a prosthetic leg, not a bent French grandmother. It worked. Virginia helped liberate several French towns. Her partisan units seized bridges, ambushed German patrols, and gathered intelligence for advancing American troops. Her contribution to France's liberation was enormous. After the war, Virginia Hall became the only civilian woman to receive the Distinguished Service Cross. President Truman wanted to present it personally, but she declined a public ceremony. Modesty was in her nature. When the OSS was disbanded, Virginia joined the newly formed Central Intelligence Agency. She was one of the CIA's first employees. She continued working in intelligence until she retired in 1966. Not every OSS heroine worked in the field. Many fought from desks in Washington. Their weapons weren't pistols, but sharp minds and analytical skills. Without them, field operations would have been impossible. The OSS Research and Analysis Branch was the organization's brain. They collected and analyzed information from around the world. Hundreds of analysts studied enemy economies, politics, and military capabilities. Many were women. These analysts came from America's top universities. They had degrees in history, economics, languages, geography. In peacetime, they would have been professors or researchers. The war redirected their talents. Julia McWilliams worked in the OSS Registry Division. She processed classified documents and maintained agent files. Later, she became famous as Julia Child, America's beloved chef. Few people knew about her intelligence background. OSS analysts produced detailed reports on enemy nations. They studied industry, transportation, agriculture. They identified weaknesses in enemy economies. This information guided bombing campaigns and sabotage operations. Female cipher clerks played a vital role. They encoded and decoded thousands of messages every day. The work demanded absolute precision. A single mistake could get an agent killed. Cipher clerks worked around the clock, often under extreme pressure. The OSS also employed cartographers. They created detailed maps for operations behind enemy lines. Female cartographers studied aerial photographs, plotted routes, marked key targets. Their maps saved countless lives. Translators formed another critical group. They translated captured documents, interrogated prisoners, analyzed enemy propaganda. Fluency in rare languages made these women invaluable. Some knew Japanese, Chinese, Arabic, Balkan languages. OSS librarians and archivists built a remarkable information system. They cataloged millions of documents, photographs, maps. Thanks to them, any piece of information could be found in minutes. In the pre-computer age, this was extraordinary. Many analysts worked in morale operations. They created propaganda, disinformation, forged documents. The goal was to undermine enemy morale and support resistance movements in occupied territories. These women rarely got recognition. Their names didn't make the papers. They didn't receive medals. But their contribution was fundamental. Every successful operation started with their analysis and preparation. Virginia Hall wasn't the only one risking her life in occupied Europe. Dozens of other OSS women operated as agents on enemy soil. Their stories are less famous but equally heroic. Elizabeth McIntosh served with the OSS in Asia. She worked in India, Burma, and China. Posing as a journalist, she gathered intelligence on Japanese forces. She also helped create propaganda to demoralize the enemy. Elizabeth wrote leaflets that were dropped over Japanese positions. They told of Japan's defeats and urged surrender. After the war, she admitted she never knew if her work made a difference, but she gave it everything she had. Jane Foster worked for the OSS in Indonesia. She spoke several Asian languages and understood local cultures. Her job was organizing resistance against Japanese occupiers. She coordinated local guerrillas and supplied them with weapons and instructions. Working in Southeast Asian jungles was brutal. Tropical diseases, oppressive heat, dangerous wildlife. Add to that the constant threat of Japanese patrols. Jane spent nearly 2 years in the field, showing remarkable endurance. Mary Croft worked in Stockholm, Sweden's neutral capital. Under diplomatic cover at the American Embassy, she ran an intelligence network across Scandinavia. Sweden was a crucial window into occupied Europe. From there, information about Germany could be gathered. Mary recruited agents among businessmen, diplomats, refugees. She organized information channels through neutral territory. Her network provided valuable intelligence on German industry and military production. This helped target bombing campaigns. Amy Elizabeth Thorpe, codenamed Cynthia, was one of the most effective agents. She worked for the OSS in Washington and overseas. She used her charm to extract classified information from diplomats and military officers. Cynthia obtained critical cipher codes from Vichy France. This allowed the Allies to read enemy communications. She also got Italian naval codes. Her methods were controversial, but her effectiveness was undeniable. Adeline Gordon worked as a radio operator in Norway. She was inserted to support the Norwegian resistance. She transmitted intelligence about German warships in Norwegian fjords. This information was crucial for the Allied fleet. Radio work in Norway was especially dangerous. The Germans monitored radio frequencies obsessively. Direction-finding trucks constantly scanned the airwaves. Adeline had to transmit from remote locations, often in terrible weather. She completed her mission and came home after the war. The Pacific War presented unique challenges: vast distances, dense jungles, unfamiliar cultures. The OSS sent many women to Asia, and their work proved critical to defeating Japan. Betty McIntosh served in China and Burma. She worked in psychological operations, creating propaganda to break Japanese morale. Betty had basic Japanese skills and understood the enemy's culture. This made her work especially effective. She designed leaflets that exploited Japanese soldiers' fears. They claimed the government was lying to them. They described Japan's inevitable defeat. Some Japanese POWs admitted these leaflets influenced their decision to surrender. Julia Child, before her fame as a chef, served with the OSS in Ceylon and China. She worked in the classified registry. She also helped develop shark repellent to protect underwater mines from shark attacks. Julia's work seemed mundane, but it mattered. Every document had to be properly classified and stored. Lost classified information could be catastrophic. Julia performed her duties flawlessly. Jane Foster-Zlotowski worked in psychological operations in Indonesia and Indochina. She produced materials for local populations, urging resistance against Japanese occupation. Her language skills made her indispensable. Jane worked directly with local resistance leaders. She explained Allied strategy and coordinated their operations. After the war, many became important political figures in their countries. Some remembered the American woman who helped them in their darkest hour. Eloise Page worked in India, coordinating OSS operations across the region. She organized supply lines for guerrilla groups in Burma. Weapons, ammunition, food, everything flowed through her operation. Logistics in jungle and mountain terrain was a nightmare, but Eloise handled it. She also liaised with British intelligence and Indian allies. Coordinating different organizations was complex. Each had its own priorities and methods. Eloise's diplomatic and organizational skills made her invaluable. OSS women in Asia faced extra challenges. Many Asian cultures were deeply patriarchal. A woman in a military role provoked surprise and skepticism. But these American women proved themselves through results. They worked amid tropical diseases, poor communications, scarce resources. Many contracted malaria, dysentery, other tropical infections. But they kept going. Their dedication was absolute. While agents risked everything in the field, thousands of women worked at OSS headquarters in Washington. The building on Constitution Avenue became the nerve center of American covert operations. Missions were planned there, intelligence analyzed, crucial decisions made. Eloise Randolph Page worked in Donovan's inner office. She had access to the organization's deepest secrets. Her job demanded absolute reliability and discretion. She knew more classified information than most generals. Secretaries to OSS leadership weren't just typists. They helped plan operations, prepared briefings, coordinated between divisions. Their organizational skills were critical to keeping the massive operation running. Marion Janet Freezer ran the research division. Her team analyzed thousands of documents, building comprehensive profiles of enemy nations. Economy, military strength, political conditions, everything was studied with scientific rigor. Marion had a PhD in history. She applied academic methodology to intelligence work. Her reports were so detailed and accurate that military planners and policymakers relied on them to shape post-war plans. Doris Parkinson worked in the cartography division. Her team created maps for secret operations worldwide. Every map had to be perfect. An error could send an agent into a trap or doom an entire mission. Doris personally reviewed every map before it went to the field. She cross-checked against aerial photos, agent reports, pre-war maps. Her meticulousness saved lives. Agents knew they could trust Washington's maps. Women staffed the finance division, managing OSS secret funds. Millions of dollars flowed to covert operations worldwide. Every cent had to be accounted for. Yet, the transactions had to stay secret. This division funded partisan movements, paid informants, bankrolled underground operations. Female accountants devised complex systems of covert accounts and cutouts. Their work ensured money reached where it was needed without leaving traces. Women attorneys staffed the legal division. They navigated complex international law, advised on POW issues, built legal frameworks for covert operations. Their expertise protected the OSS from legal vulnerabilities. The personnel division was also run by women. They vetted thousands of OSS candidates. They conducted security checks, interviews, capability assessments. Their decisions determined who got access to classified work. These women didn't get the glory field agents received, but without them, the OSS couldn't have functioned. They were the invisible foundation of the entire organization. Every successful operation began with their planning and support. When the war ended, the OSS was shut down. President Truman signed the order disbanding it in September 1945. Thousands of employees, including the women, returned to civilian life. For many, the transition was jarring. Years in intelligence had changed them. They carried secrets they couldn't share. They'd lived through dangers and adventures they couldn't describe. Ordinary peacetime life felt flat. Most women returned to traditional roles. They became housewives, mothers, teachers. Their wartime service stayed secret. Neighbors and friends never knew the quiet woman next door had been a spy. Some joined the newly formed Central Intelligence Agency in 1947. Virginia Hall was among the CIA's first employees. She continued covert operations for another 20 years. But the CIA offered women far fewer opportunities than the OSS had. The Cold War brought a more conservative culture. Women were pushed back into support roles. Fieldwork became almost exclusively male territory. This was bitter for those who'd proved themselves during the war. They'd risked their lives, shown courage and competence. But in peacetime, they were again seen only as secretaries and analysts. Documents about OSS women's work stayed classified for decades. Their stories weren't told. When war histories were written, women were usually left out. Their contributions were forgotten or downplayed. Only in the 1970s and 80s did historians begin paying attention to women in intelligence. Documents started being declassified. Veterans began sharing memories. Slowly, the truth emerged. It turned out OSS women had played a critical role in victory. Without their analysis, fieldwork, organizational abilities, many operations would have failed. They weren't support staff. They were full participants in the intelligence war. Today, their stories are taught in intelligence schools. They've become role models for a new generation of women in intelligence. Modern agencies recognize women's contributions and actively recruit them at all levels. Some OSS veterans lived to see themselves honored. Virginia Hall died in 1982 as a recognized hero. Others passed away without hearing thanks. But their legacy endures. Every woman working today at the CIA, FBI, or NSA stands on these pioneers' shoulders. OSS women proved that gender doesn't determine ability to serve your country in the most dangerous roles. The story of Office of Strategic Services women is a story of transformation. How war changed perceptions of women's capabilities. How circumstances forced society to reconsider old prejudices. Before the war, the idea of female spies seemed absurd to most Americans. Women were considered too weak, too emotional, too unreliable for such work. Their place was home, not behind enemy lines. But necessity forced a reckoning. The OSS needed people with specific skills. Gender became secondary. Language ability, intelligence, courage, those were what mattered. And women had those qualities just as much as men. OSS women proved their worth through action. They didn't ask for special treatment. They underwent the same training as men. They ran the same dangerous missions. They showed the same dedication. Their stories reveal the diversity of contributions. From Virginia Hall running partisans in occupied France to anonymous analysts in Washington. From radio operators in Norway to propagandists in China. Each played a role in the massive machinery of victory. But after the war, society tried reverting to old norms. Women were pushed back into traditional roles. Their wartime service was forgotten or minimized. Decades passed before their history was properly told. Today, their stories are being rediscovered. Books are written, films made, monuments erected. OSS women are finally getting the recognition they deserve. Their contribution to victory is being acknowledged. But questions remain. How many more stories are still untold? How many women worked in the shadows whose names we'll never know? How many took their secrets to the grave without ever being recognized? The OSS women's history teaches important lessons. It shows that in critical moments, society can overcome its prejudices, that necessity can break down barriers, that women are capable of anything men can do when given the chance. It also reminds us that progress isn't linear. After the war, many gains were lost. Women were pushed back. It took decades to regain what was achieved during wartime. Today, women serve throughout intelligence and military organizations. They're field officers, analysts, directors. They run operations and make critical decisions. This would have been unthinkable without the pioneering work of OSS women. Their legacy isn't just their specific wartime accomplishments. It's proving that women belong in intelligence work, that they can be trusted with the nation's deepest secrets, that they can perform under the most dangerous conditions. The women of the OSS opened a door that can never be fully closed. They showed what was possible, and they paved the way for everyone who followed.